Mr. Makoba, please do give us a briefing.
Good morning, colleagues. Welcome in Franklin Auditorium. In the event of an incident or any emergency, we have PA system in this auditorium. We will receive the message from the control center explaining to us what is wrong in the building, if we should evacuate the building. We listen to that message. Then you take your belongings. However, before you leave the room, please help people with disability if they are in the room. Then we have 2 available emergency doors. I have one at the corner there on my right, and I have another one on my left. When you use the one on my right, you go out as a passage. Then you take your right again. At the end of the passage, there's a glass door there. Go through that glass door. Then you take your right again, take the staircase down, go through the security checkpoint. Then outside there on the garden, you will see assembly point number 2. That's where we assemble there with our attendance register. I hope everybody signed the register in this auditorium. If you use the door on my left, you go out and take the same staircase to assembly point number 2. If the staircase is blocked, then you go, as you go to the building, follow the passage by the retail stores, you take your right, and then go through the security checkpoint as well. Then in front of you, you will see the car park. Next to the car park, there is assembly point number 1. We can also assemble there during the emergency. Should you need to report anything in this auditorium, any hazard or any fire, anything that you need to be reported, on your cell phone, you dial 011-800 6666 or 011-800 441. Should the fire start in this room, on my right on the passage we have a fire extinguisher there. We can use that fire extinguisher to extinguish the fire. Only those colleagues who train to fight the fire can help us with that. On those 2 nearest assembly point, you wait there until our safety officers come and address us if the building is safe. And then you come back in the same auditorium and continue with the business of the day. I thank you.
Colleagues, to my left-hand side, we've got the Eskom Group Chief Executive, Andre de Ruyter, the Chief Operations Officer, Jan Oberholzer. We've got the Generation Executive, Philip Dugashe. We've got the Distribution Executive, Monde Bala, and Transmission Executive, Sekhumoto Skiepas. On the line, we've got our other colleagues who will be in attendance and assist with answers to all your questions. I urge you all to do what you can to limit your questions to those that have not been answered. We made the presentation and the media statement, which will be emailed during this briefing, to answer all your questions even before you ask them. We know you are busy people. We shall endeavor to keep you here only for less than 3 hours. At this point, Andre de Ruyter is going to come and give us opening remarks. He will be followed by Jan Oberholzer, Philip Dugashe, and Sekhumoto skip us, and then we'll take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sikunati. Welcome also to my colleagues assisting me today, and also who are going to do the lion's share of the talking, being the operational executive team. And I have to say that it's these gentlemen, and unfortunately they are all men, but they are doing a particularly fine job and put in an extremely hard effort to keep the lights on. Where we are today, right now, is that our unplanned capacity outages in generation are sitting at 9,392. For those of you who've been following the Eskom system, you'll know that this is the lowest that it's been in a very, very long time, and that's a very positive reflection on the performance of our system, thanks to the leadership of Philip Dukashe and his team of power station managers. I think we are starting to see the results of their interventions as a leadership team. On the other hand, we have planned capacity outages of 7,146, which is just under 15% of our total installed capacity, and is equivalent to more than 2 large 6-pack stations on planned maintenance. I think these numbers demonstrate our commitment to continue to carry out our planned maintenance in accordance with our reliability maintenance recovery program, and it demonstrates that we are absolutely firm in our resolve to return our generation system to long-term predictability and sustainability. Just some feedback on major issues that you might be interested in. The investigation into the unfortunate explosion at Medupi 4 is now nearing completion. We have established that there appears to have been non-compliance with procedures. Appropriate action will be taken against those after following due process. The estimated cost to repair is about 2.5 billion rand, so that's an unfortunate blow that we have suffered. The asset is insured, and we are currently in discussions with our insurance to ascertain exactly who will pay for what and to what extent we will be able to recover the cost of repairing this facility. Jan and Philip will elaborate further on that. From a system point of view, of course, this means that we have 720 megawatt that we don't have available, which further puts a constraint on the system, making the current UCLF number even more important to monitor and to sustain in order to keep adequate reserve capacity on the system. The other major outage that we have recently started is at Kubrick 2. We have taken that unit down for a scheduled refueling outage. We've also scheduled the steam generator replacement project to coincide with the refueling outage. This means that we will not have the 920 megawatt normally produced by this unit on the grid for a period of 155 days. On the 18th of January, the National Nuclear Regulator gave us approval to proceed with that project. So this is a tightly regulated activity. And I have to say that the regulator really keeps us on our toes, and we have to demonstrate full compliance with all the required nuclear safety measures that can possibly be taken. Of course, we also benchmark our activities against international nuclear operators. And I'm pleased to report that at the end of last year, during a benchmarking exercise, we improved our rating from our international peers. And that is testimony to the great work being done by Ridwan Bakadian and his team at Kubrick. The outage at Kubrick 2 will be followed by a similar outage for Kubrick 1. So the system will be constrained by that reduced contribution of our most competitive and also our most reliable plants. And that means that there is still a risk of load shedding that remains in the system. And therefore, we wish to use this opportunity again to urge South Africans to please use electricity wisely and sparingly, bearing in mind that it is up to us as a collective to manage the current capacity constraint that we find ourselves in. At the end of last year, we communicated during instances of load shedding that we had unfortunately detected incidents of sabotage. Eskom management responded very decisively to this challenge, and we have employed 450 additional security guards. We have deployed drones equipped with infrared cameras to also be able to operate at night, as well as installed intelligent cameras that can detect untoward behavior at our facilities and alert control rooms so that we can dispatch security teams to respond. It's still early days, but it really seems to ensure that we are able to protect our assets through both overt as well as covert intelligence gathering and surveillance to ensure that those who, for whatever peculiar reason they might have wished to cause damage to our infrastructure, that those people are prevented from doing so. Just a couple of remarks on coal. I have to compliment the generation team for their really excellent performance during one of the wettest seasons in the past number of years. We had no incidents of disruptions caused by wet coal, so our rain preparedness program worked really well, and the proactive planning put in place by Philip and the team really have made a big difference there. Similarly, Sandile Siyaya, who is our head of primary energy, he and his team have paid a lot closer attention to coal quality, and we have seen the benefit of improved coal quality come through in our numbers because we are now producing more megawatt hours per ton of coal than we used to previously. So the attention to one of your key operational variables really is paying dividends. Of course, coal is a major expense item on our balance sheet. Again, as we communicated at our annual results, we have been able to achieve a reduction in real terms in our coal price. We have in fact seen a reduction in nominal terms as well, an 0.7% reduction in our rand per ton that we pay. So on all metrics, I think we are getting our arms around the coal quality and coal supply challenge that we've got, and it's starting to reflect in our numbers both operationally as well as financially. Lastly, we remain committed to operations excellence. This is a program that is led by Jan Oberholzer, our Chief Operations Officer, and he gives it a lot of impetus and drives it very hard. And I believe that the improvement that we are seeing is in no small part attributable to hands-on management, visible felt leadership, and boots on the floor. That's our mantra, to ensure that our managers, our leaders are seen out there on our plants, at our facilities, walking the floor, engaging with our staff, visibly leading and giving guidance to our teams. And I want to thank in particular our leadership at operational level for the contribution that they are making in supporting this initiative. With that, it remains for me to hand over to Jan Oberholzer. I don't think he needs any introduction. So Jan, over to you. Thank you.
Good morning. Morning to all. Andre, thank you. And then to my three colleagues, Philip, Monde and Sekhamotso. Guys, I would like to thank you and your teams for a tremendous job you're doing. Thank you for the leadership you're showing. Thank you for the hard work. Thank you for understanding the mandate that we do have to the country and the economy and to the lives of 60 million people of the country. So thank you so much. Please convey the sincere appreciation to all. Okay. Now it's stuck. There it's going. I'll start by giving just an overview and a summary of the operations, and basically to support what the Chief has said at a high level. So we are proud to say that we haven't implemented any load shedding since the 19th of November 2021. In itself, I believe, from the generation side, a significant positive contribution, although we still have significant challenges. Really positive performance. What we see on the wire side of the business, transmission and distribution, very positive performance. And a little bit later, I'll go into some more detail. In distribution specifically, in terms of the frequency of incidents and the duration of incidents, as well as restoration of faults, an improvement on the performance of last year. So really good. And if we take the excessive rains, good rains obviously, and very blessed with the rains, made it extremely difficult for the generation colleagues. So there has been a little bit of a decline during this period, but overall, on average, very good performance. So well done. Transmission side, Sekhamotso and his team, where we were extremely concerned 2 years ago, that performance that went south has been turned around very positively. And the overall network performance of transmission is very, very positive. We do have challenges, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later, but all in all, good performance. On the transmission side also, the same as in generation, maintenance of the networks are receiving significant attention because of the age of the networks. Now, very proud, Kusile 4, the power station just outside Witbank, we managed to successfully synchronize unit number 4 to the grid late last year on the 23rd of December. And since then, I was on site on the 12th of January, and the day before, we achieved 800 megawatts full capacity out of this unit. Now, that is a bonus to our teams and to the capacity. And for the next 6 months, we will then go through capability testing and commissioning procedures. So intermittently, we will have the luxury of additional capacity, even though it's not, commercial operation to the network yet. Kubrick, I need to start by saying we are extremely proud of the performance in terms, number one, of safety. A couple of years ago, we implemented an independent external body that will look, it consists of about 6 independent and very specialized skills that twice a year comes to have a look and do a deep dive in how safe we operate Kubrick. And the last report we have received, it was stated categorically that, well done, Kubrick, you are operating this plant very safely. Coal stock levels, just to support, on average 46 stock days. And not one station is below the Eskom prescribed level, as well as below the grid code. And the Chief has already said that the PED team is doing quite well in real terms, in terms of the cost of coal per tonne. Rain readiness, we've spoken about. Again, well done. Over the last 2 years, we had significantly improved our readiness in terms of dealing with wet weather. So sometimes we do have little hang-ups, but as the Chief has said, nothing that we couldn't handle, like in the past, about 2 years ago where we had significant challenge. So to the team also, well done. We then successfully commissioned the Camden Ash Dam. If you can recall, last year in 2020, we had actually to shut down the whole of Camden Power Station because of the risk of the ash dam. Now, since that period, we've successfully now commissioned at the end of November the Camden Ash Dam. And as we speak, Philip will talk more about it, 6 of the 8 units are in commercial operation, and 1 of the units are in a maintenance phase now. So very good performance and contribution to the capacity of Camden. In addition, the Majuba Tippler, the railway line between Ermelo and Majuba, the Tippler right at the end, that was also successfully commissioned at the end of November. So, and as we speak, 2 trains per day we utilize on this Tippler to actually deliver coal to Majuba Power Station. So, and that displaces about 247, nearly 250 coal trucks per day. So the intention is to slowly but surely ramp it up to 6 trains per day, which will obviously assist greatly with availability and cost of the coal supply to Majuba. Environmental matters receiving a lot of attention. The emissions, good progress. We're not yet where we set ourselves targets, but we have moved very positively towards ensure that we are compliant. We do have challenges, specifically at Kendal, which we are dealing with, but a good performance. On the water usage, not good. That is an area that receives still a lot of attention. I believe that Philip and his team are sitting every second week looking at what needs to happen, where do we have challenges and what we need to do to make sure. However, the unpredictability and reliability of the units and all the trips does not contribute positively to the use of water. If I go a little bit deeper, and it will just be a high-level deep dive on generation, Philip will obviously spend a lot of time. We do have challenges. Our energy availability is below 63%. We set ourselves a target of 70%. And the forecast for year-end will be 63%. So I hear people are talking about 70, 68. No. We believe that by year-end, 63%. And then to take it from there is going to be difficult because, as the Chief has said, and you'll see in the figures going forward in the slides, we will not sacrifice plant maintenance. So, and that obviously has a negative contribution to the energy availability, but it is an investment in the future. So we do have challenges in generation, but when we talk about these challenges, we need to be specific. And these are related to the coal fleet. You know, if you take Kubrick, that's part of generation. If you take the peaking plants, if you take the open cycle gas turbines, which is part of peaking, good performance, solid performance. Our pump storage, really solid performance. So the challenge that we have is in the coal fleet. And again, I would like to remind us all, if you take Medupi and Kusile out of the equation, on average, these power stations are in excess of 42 years old. 42 years old, very old, not been maintained and looked after. So it is really challenging. Reliability maintenance, we are focusing quite a lot on to make sure that we are ready when we open the breaker to maintain a unit. It doesn't help that you are only 50% ready. You open the breaker, then your outage is not going to be successful. So there's a huge focus on getting ready before you open the breaker, at least an 80%. Now, our CFO has started making available funds for these outages, reliability maintenance outages. What we are really putting a lot of focus on is to make these costs and money available for outages in T-24, T-18. So you need the money made available long before the breaker is actually opened. although I said the last load shedding was on the 19th of November, we haven't performed well year to date in terms of the days of load shedding. So we had 51 days of load shedding since the 1st of April, compared to 47 days the previous year. So as you can see, still totally unacceptable performance, which we are actually, and we are really doing a lot to make sure that we turn this performance around. However, it is important to understand and to note that the reliability maintenance will continue. And at times when the capacity is not sufficient for, the demand of the country, we will not sacrifice in bringing units back, which then obviously will increase the risk of load shedding to the country. Safety, very positive. We have set ourselves tolerance levels of 0.3 LTIR, and we're way below. However, regrettably, we had 3 employee and 2 contractor fatalities during the year, and we are really not performing well in terms of these fatalities. It is so important for us that whoever, contractors as well as our colleagues, to come, to work safely and at night to return safely. So it's receiving a lot of attention. We will, and myself, I'll set the example. In terms of visible felt leadership, it is something that is not at the level where we want it. And this is where the leaders, my 3 colleagues on that side and myself, we really set the example going forward in terms of being visible in terms of safety. The Chief has spoken about the self-goal that we achieved, Medupi Unit 4. So if you take Medupi Unit 4, 730 megawatts. If you take Kubrick Unit 2, 920, that is really putting a strain on the capacity, the available capacity of the generation fleet. However, the Chief has just said the way we perform now. So without that, in excess of 1,500 megawatts, 600 megawatts, we are really performing well. So Philip, to you, your leadership and all your colleagues, really well done. If you can recall, we had a generator transformer that exploded. I think it was in September last year. So we successfully replaced that generator transformer, and that unit is back on commercial operation as from the beginning of the year, another 640 megawatts. We deep dive a little bit into transmission. The system and its lost target we set ourselves. These are, how is your system really performing in terms of interruptions? So the target we set ourselves, we well within, so good performance. We had no major incidents year to date, having a huge negative effect on the system. Maintenance is at a very high level, so really positive performance. If you take some of your assets in the transmission system and on the network, is in excess of 45 years old. So it is important to make sure that we maintain not only those assets, but specifically those assets also moving forward. And then very few interruptions. However, what is more and more becoming a problem is the issue of theft and vandalism, which makes it extremely difficult and challenging in this environment. You do identify the risk areas, you do deploy the necessary security in those areas, but these innovators, if you can call them, give them that positive word, then just go to another place and they do what they need to. I'll show some pictures just now. On the distribution side, electrification connections, we've exceeded year to date the target we set ourselves by close to in excess of 5,000 connections. The network duration, the SAIDI and SAIFI, these are duration incidents and frequency incidents. So it's on average what a customer group experience in a period of 1 year. We are well within the targets we have set ourselves. Internationally, this is really good performance. Planned maintenance, we are a little bit behind. However, I don't believe that we will catch up exactly what we set ourselves a target, but still really good maintenance focus on the networks. Refurbishment also behind, but it is an area that I can assure you that is receiving the necessary attention. So the targets we set ourselves, we unfortunately haven't received it. And I've spoken earlier about restoration time, especially good performance on average if you take the good rains we had. I've decided just to show a few pictures what I mean by theft and vandalism. So here you can see on your left-hand side, the slide on the left, where you have a steel tower and you can see some of the members of that tower is gone. So it just takes another few members and then the tower will collapse, as you can see on the other two pictures. And that means an interruption. And we need to be very careful. If this happens on a line that is feeding millions of customers and there is no redundancy, it is a significant risk to the country. So this is really something that is difficult to manage. We're trying our best, but it remains a real challenge. Group capital, good performance since the beginning of the year, financial year, 1st of January 2021. We have put into commercial operation 2 units, Kusile 3 as well as Medupi 1. I've spoken about Kusile Unit 4. Then on the next slide, I'll spend a little bit more time on the latent defects and what is the progress. Execution of our emission projects is continuing well. The same on our ash dam projects. We want to make absolutely sure that we don't in future have another Camden. I believe that will be a lot of egg on our face and totally unacceptable. If we then look at these major boiler plant defects, if you can recall, we started at Medupi Unit 3, 75-day outage, where we have done quite a lot of modifications on the mills, the gas air heaters, the fabric filters, and the ducts, taking this flue gas out. Now, we have implemented these modifications on all 6 units at Medupi and at Unit 1 at Kusile. Currently, we're implementing it on Kusile Unit 2. That went on an outage in November, and it's planned to be returned to service next week. And then we will, I think yesterday, we took Kusile Unit 3 off for a maintenance, and we will then implement the modifications also on Unit number 3 at Kusile. I believe it's important to mention that Medupi 3, we had some inspections in November, and since those inspections that we carried out, the EAF for Medupi 3 for the last 8 weeks has been in excess of 93%. I quickly had a look this morning when I was walking down here, that Medupi, as we speak, and I trust, or let me say, in half an hour or 45 minutes ago, Medupi 5 units were contributing 3,443 megawatts to the grid, with 180 megawatts of partial load losses. Really, really good performance of Medupi. We do have the trips, but the capacity availability is good. So, decided just to display this picture, and you will have access to the pack, is how did we perform since the beginning of the major build. So on the right-hand side, we have then the 3 units, Kusile 4, 5, and 6, that is not yet in commercial operation, although 4 has been synchronized to the grid. So by March 24, we trust that we will have the last unit in commercial operation, and then we will have also a fully operational and commercial operation power station, Kusile. Generation, very high level. I've spoken about the energy availability, not good performance. However, we need to, again, balance it off with the positive PCLF, the planned maintenance of 10%. And as the Chief has said, as we stand here, it is just below 15%. So we are really giving attention to maintain our plant. Trips, too many. The partial load losses, just to help you again, if you have a vehicle And if you put your foot flat on the pedal, and it gives you 120 kilometers per hour. So partial load losses, if you put your foot on the pedal and you only get 100 kilometers, that's different, that 20 kilometers, we say there's something wrong that you cannot get to maximum capacity. So that is a partial load losses. So, and if you take that 4,700, it is 1.5 big power stations, maybe not 1.5, but 1 1/3 of a 6-pack power station that is out and not available because of this. When you put your foot down, you don't get the maximum capacity out of it. Unplanned, Philip will speak a lot about it, and then obviously because of the number of breakdowns and the trips that we have, we are spending much more in terms of diesel in order to run our open cycle gas turbines. And I had the question before, are we going to have the same problem with the open cycle gas turbines when we need them and not available? I can assure you that the attention is given to make sure when it's necessary to maintain them, they will not be used, they will be maintained. This graph just illustrates high level. Over a couple of years, the energy availability, the planned, the unplanned, as well as other being coal and Camden. So we can see that the top bar, the second bar on top, the light blue, is the one that is really giving us headaches. So that is an unplanned component of the EAF. But Philip will go into detail to explain that 25%. This graph is just illustrating the dark blue is the long-term reliability planned maintenance, where the gold is whenever we do have the opportunity to do opportunistic short-term maintenance. Nuclear, Kubrick, the EAF is down because we had 2 incidents at 2 trips at Kubrick Unit 1. And then also we had a very long outage, unnecessary long outage on Unit 1. So that's why the energy availability is not at the 91% plus target we set ourselves. Although the forced loss rate, the energy losses, that is positive, and being ready for long-term operation, we believe very good focus and performance. So at the end of last week, we had a scare on Unit 1, and this is while Unit 2 was off load. So we had an alarm on one of the main feed pumps, so we had to take the unit down. Remember, this is now while Unit 2 is out on outage, so we had to take unit down to 13% power. Colleagues had to go into the containment area, deal with the alarm, and then, unfortunately, when you are returning the unit and start ramping it up, it is not like a cold fire unit that it's relatively quick. Here, you can only ramp it up 2% every hour. So, as we speak, we are at about 800 megawatts, so we believe that by close after evening peak tonight, we may be at full load. Just before we took Unit 2 off, we're quite proud. It was running for 454 days without an incident, so good performance. In terms of long-term operation, we're doing a lot of work to get ready, so there are a number of projects that we need to execute, and obviously it's in close collaboration with the NNR. It's important to understand that there is a solid line between the NNR and Eskom, specifically Kubrick. We respect them, and they respect what we need to do. However, it is not that they will turn a blind eye when we do what we're not supposed to be doing. I can assure you that the NNR is extremely strict, and we do respect them for the position that they exercise. So in conclusion, from my side, we see strong performance on the wire side of the business, transmission as well as distribution. Kubrick continues to operate very safe, and it's a very reliable power station when the units are on load. also extremely cheap in terms of operating expenses to run it. And this is why it just makes sense. It's so compelling just to extend the life of Kubrick. The generation business on the coal side, coal fleet, a number of opportunities and challenges. The rest of the generation business running extremely good. We will continue with the planned maintenance, as I said earlier, and it may contribute to the risk of load shedding. But we've taken a decision and we will stick to that decision because we need to continue to invest in the future. On the modifications, new plant, we're making steady but slowly very good progress and we'll continue to do so. And obviously, we will do whatever we can to limit load shedding because we do understand the impact thereof on the country and the lives of 60 million people. So I can assure you that we have dedicated and committed colleagues that fully understand this mandate, and they will do what they need to do to make sure that we improve the performance of generation. However, I need again to emphasize the fact that we have old plant, we will fix it, but it will not be sufficient etc. So we urgently need 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts, and we've been saying this, me personally, for the last 2 years. So we're really looking forward to the impact of the emergency capacity program as well as policy decisions from the DMRE. And then just lastly, can I please just request you again that when you do not need to use electricity, please refrain from doing so. So thank you so much. I'd like to hand over now to my colleague, Philip Dukashi, that will take you through the deep dive in generation. Thanks, Philip. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thanks, Jan. I think a lot has been covered already, so I'll skip over some of the things that I don't need to spend too much time on. If we can move just to the previous slide, that's where we'll start. So I think, as Jan has indicated, our performance in terms of EAF, it's not where it should be. It's far from where it should be. There's a lot of work that we still need to do to improve our performance. There are a number of challenges that we are still facing, and we are working hard to make sure that we live up and we deliver what is expected. So year to date, we're currently sitting just under 63%, as Jan indicated. And then for the month of January, when we prepared this, we were sitting at 58%. That has now increased, and we're sitting at about 60% of EAF for the month of January. In terms of usage of OCGTs, that's the diesel, that's our most expensive plant, you'll see that we've exceeded the budget, so we're currently sitting at a load factor of about 8.9%. Well, today it's about 8.6%, and the budget was low at 1%. So in terms of how much we've used, it's much higher, and obviously it costs a lot more. As indicated, we are continuing to drive our planned maintenance, so our EAF is also impacted by how much planned maintenance we are doing during this time. And we're pushing it hard at the moment. Sorry. This is, there we go. I just want to cover UCL if I'm going the wrong way here. To go back, there we go, sorry. I'm revealing some of the secrets that I'll be sharing with you. In terms of our UCLF, that's how we stand at the moment. So you'll see total UCLF. So if we, I don't know where the pointer is here, there we go. But you can see our total UCLF right in the middle, 24.6%, and it's comprised of full load losses. Those are units that are off completely. Boiler tube leaks contribute about 2.3 percentage points. The trips, 2.5%, and then outage slips. That's when a unit goes onto an outage, and then it has not come back as planned. So that's a 3.6%. And then partial load losses, 10.5%. That is by far the biggest contributor to our UCLF. So I think Jan has indicated what partial load losses, and these we would have when, for instance, our vacuum is not where it should be, when we have mills that are not performing as they should be, when emissions are high and we have to take load losses in order to limit the emissions to the atmosphere, and also when you have other plant trips. So all of that contributing 10.5 percentage points and a total of 24.6% then UCLF year to date. You'll see other things that then contribute to capacity that's not available. Camden Ash constraints at some stage that was in excess of 2%. It was high, but as Jan has indicated, the dam is now fully operational. We are able to run all the units at Camden, and that is now reduced to 1% contribution. Coal, OCLF, at some of the stations we are challenged because of poor quality coal, and that does then impact our ability to run those units or those stations at full load, particularly at the Krill and at Matla, and that contributes 0.8%, and then other OCLF, which might be outside of the control of the station. There might be transmission work taking place and so on, and that's 0.9%. So total unplanned of 27.3%. Now, in order to resolve all of these, and we'll be going into more detail on some of them, some of this work requires extensive maintenance. And if you look particularly on partial load losses, that's something that we monitor every hour. And where we can intervene, we do intervene, but in some cases, we do need outages in order to reduce the partial load losses. So our outages certainly do help, and certainly when we then get the funds to execute those outages. Now, this is the graph shows on the left-hand side. It shows contribution of some of the stations to UCLF. So you'll see the biggest contributor is Tutuka Power Station. I think in the past we have indicated some of the challenges that we are seeing at Tutuka, where it's my strong opinion that the plant was neglected for quite a long time. People may have been focusing on other things, but not on maintaining the plant. And I've indicated, I think at the previous session, that the plant was in a shocking state, really shocking state. So it's taking a long time to recover, and it will take a long time because of the extent of the damage that has been caused to the plant and what we then need to do. So you'll see Tutuka has contributed by far the biggest portion to the UCLF, and it's, as I said, it's going to take time. There has been a lot of work in cleaning up Tutuka. Investigations are still on the go. 20 individuals have been suspended at Tutuka, and we believe that most of them, if not all, were involved in some wrongdoing of some form or another. 2 people have been arrested already. We are hoping that there will be more arrests coming soon. So again, focus not where it should be. Instead of running the plant and maintaining it, in my view, they were focusing on other issues. We are reaping, unfortunately, the benefits of that. The second contributor is Kendall. I do believe that Kendall has turned the corner. So we had 2 units there that were off for quite some time, Units 5 and Unit 6, that contributed a lot to UCLF. Those units are now back. They are running. And in fact, for a long time now, Kendall runs without a full unit out on UCLF. We still have, I think as indicated earlier, we still have challenges at Kendal in terms of emissions. So we still need to refurbish other units, and that work still needs to continue. So still some challenges at Kendal, but I think in many areas we have turned the corner, and the performance is starting to improve. And then Duva is another station that traditionally we have major issues. There's a lot of focus, a lot of support that has been given to particularly these 3 power stations, and it's frustrating at times because the results do not correspond to that. But I think with time we will certainly overcome some of the issues that we are facing. On the right-hand side, you'll see how the various areas of plant have contributed to UCLF. Biggest contributor, it's a boiler plant, the turbine plant, and then the draft plant, and then those are the biggest contributors to UCLF. And all of that is certainly receiving attention. These are some of the initiatives, and we've spoken about these before. These are some of the initiatives that we're using to drive performance, to try and improve performance. We've talked about the 9-point plan. Rain readiness, it's part of that, and it's been driven hard, and I think, we are seeing the benefits of that, and it's really is encouraging. We still are worried, by the way, about rain, because there are predictions that up until maybe March, there will be high rainfall, particularly in up north. So we are worried about that, but it's something that we have made preparations for. We are addressing partial load losses, so we've established recovery teams. Each station is focusing on that, and what we can do, we do, and then what needs outages, we then do during the outages. Jan has talked about coal quality improvement. I have to say, I think we are really on the winning path. We're definitely not out of the woods. Now and then we will have some coal quality issues, but the response is very quick, and we are improving in that area. So that is working well. An area that is also currently of major challenge is filling of vacancies. We have lost, and unfortunately are continuing to lose, a lot of people within generation. Figures that we saw about 40 people being lost a month. Now that's extremely high. Yes, the base is big, but that is extremely high. And I think, as you would know, you normally lose your good employees first. So that is an area of concern. We can recruit, we are recruiting, but we're not doing that fast enough. And secondly, I'm worried about the loss of experience. So yes, we can bring in highly qualified and competent people, but experience has got a major role to play as well in terms of improvement. And that is a concern at the moment, that with the loss of the skilled individuals, our recovery is going to be challenged. We have focused, did indicate also previously, we have a huge focus on outage preparation. Outages give you an opportunity to correct whatever defect you may have that impacts plant performance. So huge focus on ensuring that when we open the breaker, when we start an outage, we are ready for the outage. And we've identified all the work that needs to be done, and we have placed the contracts, and material has been delivered to site, and we will then just focus on ensuring that we do a quality program, quality work during the outage. So there's a huge focus on that, and we'll touch on some of the challenges associated with that. We have a measure that measures our readiness. We call it ORI, Outage Readiness Indicator or Index, and we want to be at least 80% ready. And as we indicated previously, it takes up to 24 months to prepare for an outage, and we start monitoring from then on. So that for us, it's a huge focus. It's a critical area. And then, as Jan indicated, the number of trips is very high. So we also identifying reasons for these trips per station. Each station has got a trip reduction strategy, and we are addressing the plan that contribute to the trips. And then at the bottom, I'm not going to spend too much time on those. I think we've highlighted them before. Leadership is at the core of any changes, and we need to make sure that the leaders that we have, the PSGM, the technical plant managers, the technical managers, operating, engineering and maintenance, they do lead. And there's very clear expectations on that, and I think by and large we are doing that. And then in terms of skills and resourcing, we are continuing to source skills, as I indicated. We will bring them in, some as employees, others as contractors, because we need skill in order to improve. So that has started, and it's ongoing. Another area that we are really starting to focus on in a big way is training, making sure that we equip our people with the right knowledge and right skill to be able to take the right decisions. So in terms of outages, we've indicated that the biggest opportunity to fix plant is during an outage. So you'll see there our base plan for this financial year that ends in end of March. We planned 84 outages. Now, an outage, it will include a general overhaul where we'll take major components of the plant and change them, refurbish them, and so on. That's the longest outage. That can be 86 days or even more if we are doing other projects like CNI refurbishment. And then we have mini general overhauls, which would be 70 days. And then we have interim repairs. It can be anything up to 50 days. And then we have opportunity maintenance, which can be a day, 2 days, a weekend, or a week, and so on. So that 84 includes all of those. We have completed 33. We are currently executing 9. We have deferred to, within this financial year, 12. And we have deferred to the next financial year, 28. So those deferments, that is what concerns us as a generation, because it means that you have identified necessary work that needs to happen in order to improve or sustain your performance, but you are delaying correcting that. And part of that is due to funding, late funding, that then challenges our ability to prepare for the outages. And rather than take the unit off when you are ready, when you are not ready, when your material is not there, it's best to defer, because you are going to wait in any case, and you will incur a lot of downtime on your unit. So those deferments, they do worry us, because the plant is unforgiving. It doesn't understand that at the moment I don't have money. It will take itself off, it will fail, and you will then have to play catch up. So that's an issue that is of concern. And as we said, for us to improve the predictability, to improve availability and reliability of our plant, the GOs and the mini GOs, that's where we do most of the work. We would do anything between 15 and 20 GOs or mini GOs in a given year, and that's when we have that opportunity. So if we plan these and we execute them correctly, then we can have a significant impact, in my view, in a 3-year period, when we say we have gone through our plans, we've identified and we have corrected what needs to be corrected. So then the performance needs to improve. Unfortunately, our plant is not forgiving. So we have to be accurate about the scope that we do. If we do 90% of it, that 10% can hit you, and it can hit you hard. It can be what brings you down. So there's a lot of focus on making sure that we identify the right work, and we plan and we execute it correctly. This is the last slide on outages. So the graph on the top left hand, so that shows our readiness for outages. As I indicated, we want to be at any given stage 80% ready. So we start planning an outage at T-24, so that T-24, or those T- that you see at the top, that indicates time to the outage. So we start planning at T-24, and then we'll measure our readiness, because we define what should happen at T-18, T-12, T-6, T-3, T-1, and then we measure. We've got teams that will measure that. And you will see that we want to keep it at above 80%. And it's not been at those levels. And that's a source of concern, because for me, it means that the units will not return timeously. It means that we have to compromise sometimes on the scope that we need to do, because by the time we open the breaker, not all the material has been delivered. Not all the contracts have been placed. And you might compromise and say, rather than delay the return of the unit, let me keep it off for longer. Now we're asking for trouble if we do that. So a lot of work is going into outage readiness. If you just take the red bar, the red line, so that red line indicates a T-1, a month before the start of the outage. And you'll see, it has gone up around March up to June, and then it has come down. A lot of it is because of late funding. So funding is critical to turning our performance around. If you look on the top right-hand side, that measures how accurate we are when you say an outage will take 90 days to start then and end then. So due date performance, and you'll see that has dropped because of poor performance during the outages. So these are some of the things that we are then driving. And post-outage UCLF at the bottom right, so that again has increased. So these are the things that we are driving, and we are trying to drive hard, because these are your early indications of whether you will improve your performance or not. If we do not perform in this area, then there is no way we will improve our performance. So for us, the remaining concern is contracts, and making sure that the contracts are placed, and they are placed timeously. And we do these reviews. And again, if our funding is late, then we won't be able to give that assurance, to give ourselves that assurance. I'm now going to spend a little bit of time just talking about the improvements that we are trying to drive, and the backlog that we have in maintenance, and how that backlog has come around, and why our performance cannot be turned around in 2 months, in 6 months. You'll see, and I've chosen just 5 areas. I'm sure there are more areas where we have not done what we needed to do timeously. As a result, we are playing catch-up, but the plant is failing. So the first area, it's on vacuum. So if you look at the diagram on the left-hand side, so you'll see the red. It's a pity this is not working, but you'll see there our turbine, and then you will see below that our condenser, and then that's a steam part that you use to generate electricity. So we use steam to generate electricity. We heat water. It becomes extremely high. It turns, temperature is high. It turns into steam. And then we use steam to generate electricity. Now, it goes through the boiler. It goes through the turbine. And then it goes to the condenser. It's condensed back to water. Sorry. Now, we do that because, one, you cannot pump steam. So you have to condense your steam back to water in order to be able to pump it and do recycling. And two, you have to protect your turbine. You have to make sure that there is no water that can be deposited on the turbine. It's a high-cost equipment, and so you don't want to damage it. So we want then to evacuate the steam and let it condense to water, and we use the cooling towers then as a cooling medium in order to cool that water. How well you cool that water, it will determine how well you can run your power station or your unit. Because if the temperature is high, then it means that you cannot cool that water effectively. You cannot create enough vacuum to evacuate the steam. Now, the plant is protected. Because the turbine it's expensive, the plant will trip if you do not cool your water sufficiently, or if you do not evacuate the steam, if the pressure in the increases. So the plant will trip. it will take itself out, because then you are damaging, you're causing long-term damage to the plant. It will start by deloading, so that you're cooling less, because it's saying your cooling medium is not effective, so I'm going to cool less. I'm going to use what I have to cool less water. And if you send less steam, you will then generate less electricity. So you will see these are load losses, vacuum load losses that we suffer on these plants on a daily basis, particularly if the weather is high. So at Matla, 4 to 6, because the other units, cooling towers, have been done, up to 150 megawatts. At Krill, 640 megawatts. And Krill is a station that has been running well, running up to 6 units. But because of cooling towers, we are not able to get the full output of the station. And then it contributes to the partial load losses. And Tutuka, when we're running 4 units, it can be as high as 150 megawatts. Now, if you look at the graph at the bottom, you'll see we're plotting now the ability of the cooling towers to cool this water when the deterioration started. We're plotting it over the years. If you consider that 0, where it shows 0 degrees Celsius, that will be the design temperature. And it has been steadily climbing. You will see for all 3 stations, Krill, Matla, and Tutuka, we've plotted Duva there as well. So it's been steadily climbing. By around 2009, 2014, we should have started changing or doing the refurbishments on our cooling towers, because their ability to cool the water, their ability to do the function that they are there for, was being challenged. Now, that was not done. It was supposed to have been done. We are now running with these load losses, and it's a backlog, maintenance backlog. It's something that was identified, was not done at the time. So now we're playing catch-up. Now we're playing catch-up, and we're finding it difficult to do so. So we're finding in the cooling towers, part of the work that has to be done, there's scaling, there's fouling, which leads to inefficiencies. There's suspended solids, so you need an outage, and then you need to change the cooling medium that you use in the cooling towers, and then you can refurbish it and then bring it back, and then you will improve. You'll see the 1 unit at Tutuka, the one right at the bottom, that was done, and its ability of the cooling tower to cool the water then improved. So these projects were supposed to have been done. They were supposed to have been implemented. They have not been implemented. We're now playing catch-up, and on the bottom right-hand side, you'll see we now have projects that are talking to these. Krill, we have an outage starting tomorrow, and during that outage, we'll be working at one of the cooling towers. And then we can start correcting this at Tutuka. An investment approval is expected in February. But again, doing this work takes a long time. And you'll see even with Krill, they've got 4 cooling towers. We're starting with the first cooling tower now, but we will finish all 4 towers only in April of 2023. So that's a challenge that we're facing. At Matla, contract has been awarded. We have 3 cooling towers to do, and those cooling towers have to be done within 2022. So we're playing catch-up. We need the money in order to be able to do this work, but it's a backlog. Currently, it's leading to load losses. The second area, it's CNI refurbishment. So this is control and instrumentation. So this area of the plant, it controls the plant. So an operator will sit in the control room and press a button, and then in the field, a valve will open, a pump will start, and so on. Now, you've got hundreds of these in the plant. So you need to make sure that your control and instrumentation, it does what it's designed to do. When you press a button, a valve will start. You give a command, and then in the control room, and then something has to happen in the plant. That's a function of this. But it also acts as protection for the plant. So you will have measurement of temperature or pressure within the plant. And if there is a certain deviation, because you want to protect your plant, you don't want to damage your plant, it might trip a certain area of plant. It might start a pump for cooling and so on. If the CNI system does not work, then that protection is not there, and you're putting the plant in jeopardy. CNI system also enables safe startup and safe shutdown, and it gives you information as well. Now, sorry about that technical information, but if you look at, this is a plan that was done in 2013. So this is a plan that was done in 2013, and it plotted what needed to be done at all of these power stations. It plotted when they needed to be done. So if you look, for instance, Majuba, it was supposed to have started in 2017 and be finished in 2022. Each unit, we're supposed to refurbish and bring in new equipment, because the equipment that is there, it's obsolete, it's outdated, it's no longer supported by the original equipment manufacturers. You cannot buy the spares that you need in order to be able to do that. That was supposed to have started for Majuba in 2017. It was not done. For Kendall, it was supposed to have started also in 2017. Matimba, the same. Letabo, the same. Duva was supposed to, we've got 2 units there that we needed to do. Fortunately, at Duva, we have now done that. We are bringing back the second unit, the last unit. So that refurbishment has now been done. And then Tutuka, again, 3 units have not been done. Now, if you look at the impact of this, because these plans were not executed, and this is a 2013 plan. Because it was not executed, we are putting the plant at risk. At Matimba, the number of trips has already increased because of equipment failure, CNI equipment failure. The plant is unreliable, and there's possible plant damage, because if a certain CNI component fails, then you're leaving your plant vulnerable and without due protection. And then we risk long shutdowns because we can no longer find spares for some of this equipment. So again, that's maintenance backlog. It's something that we have to chase and we need to do. So now we have plans for all of this. So if you see there, something that was supposed to have been done from 2016 to 2021 will now be doing it from 2022 to 2027. That puts pressure on the finances of Eskom. It puts pressure on the time that we need to be able to do this work. The third one is boiler tube leaks. I think we've talked about boiler tube leaks in a number of forums. So here, the backlog is really caused by inability at a time to take a unit out and scope it out correctly, and then do the necessary changes to your plant, or measure the boiler tube thickness, and then remove those that are below a certain thickness. Now, the top graph, it shows the number of tube leaks that we've had in this year, in the last 12 months, in fact. So we've had 180 failures, and 130 of those, while we're saying maybe we could not have prevented, but there are 50 that we say could have been prevented. My view, it's probably is more. So we knew that there is a risk. We knew that a unit has to be taken down, and we knew that we have to work to do in order to fix the tube leak. But because of capacity, we can't, and then we tend to defer it, and we tend to move it to a later stage, and the plant then fails as a result. So this is another area, but it does not have a long history. It's something that we are experiencing now. If you look at the bottom, these are the number of tube leaks that we've had in a number of stations. You'll see leading the pack is Majuba, and then Hendrina, Grotvlei, and Letabo. Now, Majuba, it's a big unit, so big station. If the unit is off, we definitely feel it. And at Majuba, I had a detailed discussion with the original equipment manufacturer and our engineers. We know what needs to be done. But the outages that are required are very long, extremely long, and it's difficult to accommodate those. So the plant is constantly failing. We now have said we need to scope it out. We need to make sure that the work is done. So on the boiler tube leaks, that's the backlog that we have. And then in terms of emissions, we have legislation in the country that limits how much we can emit into the atmosphere. So if we are running the plant and we see that the emissions are increasing, we have to take a load loss. in order to meet the emissions criteria. If we don't, then Eskom can be charged, and that is actually has happened. There is a criminal case against Eskom at Kendal Power Station. So we would then take load losses in order to preserve our emissions, or to reduce our emissions. And you'll see here we've plotted everything that is emission related. But stations like Matla, like Letabo and Duva, projects have been delayed, and we're now planning to do those projects, but projects have been delayed, and as a result, we are incurring load losses as a result of this. If you look at that picture, we're saying from April to September, we've incurred UCLF of 2.85% as a result of emissions. So that is high, and again, it's taking away from available capacity. Now, some of these projects, there was a stop and start, but they were not done timeously, and they should have been done timeously, then we would not be experiencing problems at the moment. The last area I want to talk about quickly, it's in the dimming water. So this is part of the water treatment plant. So this is a table that shows the state of our dimming or demineralized water plants at our station. So we use dimming water, demineralized water, to produce electricity. It has to be of high quality, otherwise we will damage our plant. Now, if you can look at the column that says refurbishment history, and that's a plot, again, of how far behind we are. Those plants have not seen refurbishment that should have happened. And some of them, the state of them is it's not good. Tutuka is there. Maybe it should have been priority 1. You'll see it's the first one on priority 2. But things were so bad at Tutuka that during December, Tutuka had to be shut down in its entirety because the dimming water plant was not producing. And so we had 0 megawatts coming from Tutuka because the necessary work that should have happened did not happen. Now, there were other performance or human performance issues as well that we are dealing with. But the state of the plant, it makes things always on edge, and it makes it difficult. Now, these are things that should have happened. All of those 5 areas, it's things that should have happened. We are now playing catch-up. They are taking capacity away, available capacity, they're taking it away because we are not able to run our plants because of these issues. So when we talk about maintenance backlog, these are the things that are hitting us now. These are the things that we are playing catch up on, and these are the things that we need to resolve. On Medupi Unit 4, I think feedback was already given, so we've started with the work. Human error investigation was done. It's now been completed. We do believe that there was an element of procedural non-compliance, and there were definitely management failures, so corrective action has started. We have lodged an insurance claim, and we are working with the assessors to assess the complete damage, and we are working also with the OEM in this case to see how quickly we can recover this unit. We are also doing preservation on some of the plant systems that were not damaged, so that during this time that the center line or the turbine and the generator is off, those areas do not degrade. So we're doing preservation work in those. And the incident is being used as a case study just to show what can go wrong if we do not pay attention to what we need to do. So we've had extensive usage of this, and we are trying to improve our performance through that. And then Kendal, I think this has also been shared, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. The unit did return on the 3rd of January, and it's currently running. The investigation, it's not yet concluded. We have received the report from our assurance and forensic team, and we are now finalizing the report, and then we will act accordingly. But that's a new transformer that you're seeing there that is already working. My last slide. So these are enablers for generation performance. These are things that we believe that we need to get right in order for us to improve our performance. You'll see some of them, we are working on them, we are driving those hard. Others, we do believe that we will need assistance. So the first one's capable and knowledgeable contractors. Our bias is for OEMs because they design the plant, they know the plant. So our bias is for OEMs. And obviously there is a transformation imperative as well. So we need to look at that and force the OEMs to do so. But if we are looking at the performance of the plant, really our bias is to utilize OEMs. And then timeous and adequate outage funding. So we've talked about that. We have had some challenges. We continue to have challenges. I see our CFO is going, but I'm sure it's not because of that. And you know, he's working extremely hard to make sure that there is funding. Eskom does have challenges with finances. So that's an area that is of major concern at the moment. But we want to see also what we can do internally to expedite so that we can plan our outages and execute them and then correct the defects. I think the next one has been covered already. We need space for planned maintenance. Currently, at least 4,000 megawatts additional capacity is needed to be able for us to do maintenance. And again, you know, in both of these areas, funding and in this area, we're saying additional support is required. And then managing the change in energy, in the energy environment, so that we are managing. We've heard of the JET strategy, so we are supporting that, and where we can accelerate it, we are accelerating that. The issues of environmental compliance, those are also important, and we are currently working at seeing how we can match those requirements with the finances and the time that we have in order to correct our plant, to refurbish our plant so that it can perform. So that work is taking place. And then we also have internal issues, again, that we are working on. Motivation of our employees, it's quite critical. And some of the issues such as, you know, no increases and so on, those things are making it difficult to have a motivated workforce. So we are working on those issues. Disciplined execution, that's something well within our control, and we are working hard to make sure that we can achieve that, because you know, a number of the incidents that we have can be prevented, and we are working hard to prevent those. And then turnaround of critical procurement, we want to bias and move really our procurement to contracts, and not this once-off order here, once-off order there. So we want to have stability in this space and have contracts. So we leave it there. Thank you very much. So we have challenges within generation. We are working hard, nowhere close to where we should be, but we will continue to work hard and have a turnaround in generation performance. I think next is the transmission group executive, Sokomoto.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your presence and your attention. I will talk you through the system outlook for the period, apologies, I made a mistake there, January 2022 to August 2022. The presentation basically covers two aspects, the one being just looking back as to how we have done over the summer period, and then the outlook for the period ahead. As you would have gathered from the previous presenters, the majority of our power stations are operating past the midway of their operating life. On average, they are 42 years old, and this does result in higher levels of breakdown. And I think Philip and Jan have explained some of the reasons for that. The drive to implement reliability maintenance and to refurbish these assets to address the unreliability is underway, and this is an ongoing effort to bring the performance back to acceptable levels. So as the public, we are all alerted and cautioned to expect elevated risk of load shedding while the reliability maintenance program is being implemented. I think the COO indicated quite clearly that we do not want to sacrifice the maintenance because then we get into a spiral that becomes very difficult for us to recover from. Apologies. So if we look back to summer 2021-2022, this is the period from September of last year to the end of March 2022. You will recall that we had indicated in the evaluation and stress testing of the plan that we look at different ranges of unplanned availability and then to assess what impact that could have on the system. And the graph that you see on the left basically reflects the frequency of occurrence of different levels of unplanned availability, which includes also the operational loss factor. The insights from this looking back are as indicated. One, we have had unplanned unavailability higher than 11 gigawatts for approximately 94% of the time during the summer period. So we had a very difficult summer in terms of the level of unplanned availability. Now one could ask, if you are operating in this high level of unplanned unavailability, why did we not have as much load shedding as one would expect? Essentially, why not for 94% of all this period? But as one would be aware, the system is dynamic in terms of supply and demand. It is not constant. So if you have a period of high demand for electricity and it coincides with a high unplanned unavailability, then your risk becomes very high for load shedding to occur. Similarly, you may have a period of high unavailability for a prolonged period of time, which can then deplete the emergency generation reserves that we have. So those are the factors that can then translate into load shedding actually occurring. In the last financial year, starting April 2021 up to the 24th, we experienced 51 days of load shedding. And this compares to 31 days of load shedding for the previous year in total. So we actually had a very difficult year in terms of financial year 2022. A total of 30 days of load shedding occurred since September of last year. If you look at the graphs, it's really only for about 6% of the time that we had unplanned unavailability less than the 11 gigawatts that was the baseline. So we spent most of the time in a risky space, and I think we must thank the generation colleagues and the system operator for actually managing to supply even with those difficult conditions. The graph on the right basically gives you an indication of the number of days at different stages of load shedding that we have experienced. I think Jan also indicated that we do have a shortage of generation capacity in the country, and this is something that DMRE is addressing, and we are looking to support where we can because it's important that that gap be plugged. Unplanned unavailability we've spoken about, which really flows from the unreliability of plant performance. And given the level of maintenance work that we have to do, we do have a need to increase the level of plant maintenance, and that is reflected in the plans, and that does translate into a risk to load shedding because it means you are taking plant out. Even if it is for maintenance, it does translate into a bit of a risk, but that is something that I think is very necessary. And we've had occasions where the emergency reserves were very depleted or at risk of being depleted. And because of the imperative to preserve those emergency reserves, we had to then resort to load shedding, and on occasion, even overnight, so that we can pump the pump storages and replenish them in that manner. And coal quality has been a factor, but I think as Jan indicated, it is receiving attention and actually improving quite significantly. If one takes a look further back of how we have been doing in relation to load shedding, we have managed to put this together looking at a period from 2013. In this case, you need to just note that these are calendar years. Most of our reporting is in financial years, so there will be a bit of inconsistency if you just compare the numbers without making those adjustments. But what you see on the top graph, on the left scale, is the number of days that we have experienced load shedding, and on the right-hand scale is the number of hours of load shedding that we have experienced. And you will therefore note that we had the highest number of load shedding incidents taking place during 2015. We had 103 days or 103 incidents that period. However, those tended to be mostly over the peak periods and therefore of relatively short duration, and hence the number of hours that are reflected as when we experienced load shedding in 2015 is relatively low. In 2021 calendar year, we experienced fewer incidents of load shedding, but the energy that was shared and the period of exposure to load shedding was in fact higher, hence the solid line reflecting the hours approaching around 1,200 hours in total that we experienced load shedding. And this was attributable partly to constraints in the emergency reserves being pump storage and the diesel. And many of these incidents that were added on top of unavailability of plant was also to replenish the pump storages, as I indicated earlier. If you look at the graph at the bottom, what it reflects on the left-hand scale is the volume of energy that was shared. And then on the right-hand scale, the percentage of time, if you look at the total year, of how much time we actually had no energy or where we experienced load shedding. And you will note that for 2021, we have the highest number of load shedding hours at 1,150 hours, and the highest energy not supply being around 1.7 terawatt hours. So that was a very difficult year, and a lot of energy that we are not able to supply. In terms of the overall energy that was required by customers, we actually were not able to serve just under 1% of the energy that customers would otherwise have experienced. So although it sounds low, I think in terms of the percentage, clearly the impact on customers, welfare, business operations is something that we are very aware of, and we are seeking and making every effort not to get into this situation, but rather to improve going further. We've also thought it prudent to just highlight some of the contributions from the renewable energy generation that's in the country. What we are reflecting here is the installed capacity of around 5,900 megawatts, comprising wind at about 3,000 megawatts, solar PV at 2.2 gigawatts, and the concentrated solar plant at 500 megawatts. And we've then gone on to reflect the maximum contribution derived from each of the technologies in terms of the renewable plant installed in the country, and the total contribution of the 5,900 that's installed that we have received is of the order of 4,785 in November of 2021. Wind has been a major contributor at 2,639, which was in December, and solar PV next at 2,100. And we've had an occasion where the CSP, in fact, delivered slightly more than its rated capacity. The second piece of information is around the variability, the difference in 24 hours of what was supplied, which is around 1,744 megawatts, which occurred between 7th and 8th of August of last year. So what is the message? One, the installed capacity of renewable generation continues to grow as more facilities are getting commissioned. There were various delays, obviously, the impact of COVID, some of the projects were delayed and so on, but there is more and more contribution that we are getting from the renewable space. On most days, the renewable generation contributes more than 3,500 megawatts, mainly around midday, which obviously is not the ideal, but that is the nature of the technology, and that's what we have been receiving. We do have the benefit of receiving the highest peak demand contribution from wind generation to coincide with the peak demand, which is obviously in the evening. So wind generation has been quite beneficial, we believe, to the system. And the CSP has made some contribution, given that it has got a storage capacity of up to 6 hours. On the 1st of November, we've had 19% of the country's demand essentially being supplied by the renewable generation. So that contribution we expect to continue to improve and increase going forward. Overall, however, the total contribution of renewable energy to the energy in the country is of the order of 6.7%, so it's still fairly low, but that contribution is appreciated given the policy direction we are taking as a country and the constraints that we are having. The variability, as indicated, is a challenge, and it actually requires conventional generation to either be reduced or to be dispatched to make up for those changes, as the renewables tend to be self-dispatch. And I've indicated that the maximum variability day on day of 1,744, which is equivalent to 3 large coal-fired generators. So it's important that we have an appropriate mix to be able to deal with the different behaviors of the different generators. If we look ahead to the next 18 months, and I think most of you would have seen this graph before, the solid black line represents the peak residual demand forecast. So this is to the period January going to March 2023. And the different shades reflect the different capacities. The blue is available capacity excluding gas. The brown is the gas, and the yellow is the reserve requirement that we have on the system overall. And what you will be aware of is that the black solid line actually is superimposed on the diesel area. So it tells you that for the period ahead, we still expect a high usage of the emergency reserves, being the diesel generators in the country. In summary, between now and the end of March, for unavailability of around 12,000 megawatts, we do not expect any load shedding, but we do expect to use some diesel. If the availability increases to between above 13,000 megawatts, 13 to 14,000 megawatts. We expect 2 days of stage 1 load shedding, but at a very high cost. In all likelihood, we would probably go to a higher stage of load shedding, given that it is logistically not possible to actually spend or move that amount of diesel that would otherwise have been required. And lastly, for the summer period, if we are above 14,000 megawatts, then the outlook would then be 29 days of stage 2. But again, 4 billion rands of diesel is, one, not affordable, and two, it's logistically not possible to actually move that volume of diesel. So that is the summary we'd like to share. We will be firming up on the winter plan probably by mid-March, but this is the initial outlook of the period April to August. And as it stands, we expect for unplanned unavailability of around 11,000 megawatts that we would not have load shedding, but we would be spending close to 1 billion rands in OCGT costs in that period. And if the unavailability is between 12,000 and 13,000 megawatts, it increases to 5 days of stage 1 and just under 2 billion rands of OCGT spent, which, as I have indicated, is very expensive and logistically very difficult to make happen. That is it for now, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, colleagues. The last speaker is Sekgomotso
for us to get there.
And that, Philip, ties into the next question. Have you budgeted the costs for that increased maintenance?
So we know what needs to be done in terms of maintenance, yes, so that is budgeted. But in terms of getting that money, I think that becomes an issue, whether that is affordable or not. Yes, it will imply more wear and tear, and in fact the question is correct, because our energy utilization factor is very high, much higher than the benchmark. And yes, the plant will wear and tear as a result. But it does need increased maintenance, and we do know and we can quantify that, and it's just then sometimes a challenge to get the funds to be able to do that. But yeah, it's doable.
Thank you, Philip. Colleagues, his name is Philip Dugashe. He is the head of generation. Please give us the next set of questions.
We have one from Mariam Issa, again at EE Business Intelligence. Can you update us on the current status of the separation transmission subsidiary of Eskom? Has Eskom concluded all its administrative work in setting up the legal entity, board, executive management, staffing, asset transport, debt transfer, accounting structures for the transmission subsidiary? Has Eskom's shareholders signed off on the new arrangements, and if not, when will this happen? Has NERSA issued a license for the new transmission company? And if not, when is this expected? When will the new transmission company be able to start trading?
Thank you, Soza. Let's deal with those. Andre, are you able to assist there? Do we have Vuyo on the line as well?
Again, I'm going to ask Sekhamotso to please comment. He's the boss of the transmission business, so this is his responsibility.
Thank you, Andre. With regard to the legal separation of transmission, we have certainly made a lot of progress. Where we stand as we speak now is that we have obtained PFMA approval from the Shareholder Ministry and National Treasury for the transaction. This is important as it informs further steps that needed to be taken, including one, the license application that has been submitted to NERSA. So NERSA will be considering that application in due course. Clearly, I would imagine at the moment they are highly engaged with the tariff application and the engagements that go with that process, but the license application has been submitted, and we expect to engage with them in the next few weeks, hopefully. The other activity that required approval from the Shareholder Ministry to be kicked off is engagements with the lenders. As you know, Eskom has got a lot of debt, some of which is attributable to the transmission business, and that process is now commencing, but it also required the PFMA approval which was obtained. Regarding the timing exactly of what will happen, we are looking to firm up those plans through engagements with the relevant parties that drive those processes. So we would wish in our engagements with NERSA to establish how much time they require, and then those updates will be communicated in due course. On staffing, executive management, asset transfer, as you may be aware, we have the transmission division ring-fenced today in Eskom, and the intention is to transfer that business as a going concern into the new subsidiary. So the matters that relate to staffing and so on, we do not think are too difficult or will require a lot of effort. And the business can only trade once it has, one, been licensed, and two, the lender consents have been obtained. Those are probably the two most critical requirements before that entity can trade. Between now and then, we will continue as a division and continue to do the maintenance, execute projects, and do any other transmission business-related activities until we get those key decision support that we have indicated. Thank you very much.
Sigunati, if I can just add a bit more color there. The debt will be held, as far as the lenders are concerned, at an Eskom Holdings level, and the debt will then be apportioned on an intercompany basis, as is the case for most conglomerate companies. So the lenders should have exactly the same security after legal separation than before legal separation. However, an extensive due diligence revealed that in spite of the fact that the same party will still hold the debt, that in certain instances the loan agreements require explicit lender consent, and this is what we are in the process of obtaining. So we are really dotting the I's and crossing the T's and making sure that we do this very, very properly. Regarding the board of the new transmission entity, we did register last year a new legal entity, the National Transmission Company of South Africa. In fact, the full name does not have the word "of" in, as Sekhamotso reminds me frequently. And it's a state-owned corporation. It's a wholly owned subsidiary of Eskom Holdings. And we are in the process of developing a short list of directors, which we will then submit, first of all, to the Eskom board, acting as the shareholder representative of the new entity for their consideration and approval if they concur, and then ultimately to DPE as the shareholder department. And I must say we are very fortunate to have secured the interest of some highly capable individuals. So I think we should have a very capable board if all of the directors are approved by the various authorities. The asset transfer agreement between Eskom Holdings and the new entity that was signed right at the end of last year, as Sekhamotso indicated, the implementation of this agreement is still subject to a number of conditions precedent, and once these are fulfilled, the agreement will become operational, the assets will be transferred, and we can then commence operating the business. So this is a very important step in the restructuring of the South African electricity supply industry, as it will enable us to demonstrate the independent consideration of bids into the power pool by varied investors in generation, including Eskom, but also increasingly including private sector investors. And of course, to bridge the generation capacity gap that you heard about this morning, it is of the utmost importance that we open up the generation market for private investment in order to bring much needed megawatts onto the grid in the shortest possible time at the most competitive rates. Thank you.
Please just summarize this again. The National Transmission Company South Africa is wholly owned by Eskom, which itself is fully owned by the South African government, and there will be no change in the status of the bondholders currently.
That is correct, yes.
Thank you. The next set of questions, please, my colleagues.
The next set is from Miriam Issa at EE Business Intelligence. How much has the theft and vandalism and taking steps to counter it with additional security cost Eskom so far this year? The next is from Antoinette Slabart at Report. What was the cost of the repairs at Kendall Unit 1 and will it be recovered from tariffs? Have you seen a significant change in start-up oil costs following the Tutuga arrests? I refer to the cost at Tutuga, but also the whole fleet. The next is Carol Payton at News 24. Can Mr. Dukashe please provide some context on the resignations? What is the total number of employees in generation?
Thank you, Soze. Andre, are you able to take the first question, please, on our security measures? Or Jan, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Miriam, what we've invested here to date is 48 million rand and counting. So as the Chief Exec has said in the beginning of January, we have appointed a number of companies, security companies, so we've got 450 boots on the ground, as well as the intelligent cameras, as well as infrared drones. So, but year to date, 48 million. However, it will increase. Yeah, thank you. And this, what I'm talking is the cost of additional security. Thank you. The second question on to net, the cost of repairs at Kendall, it's estimated, and we're in the process finalizing it, 100 million for the installation and about 350 million for the transformer. And the cost will be recovered through the tariff over the useful life of the asset. So depreciation and return on assets. The question on startup fuel oil cost, we have since the beginning of 2021, April, somewhere out there, since the dedicated focus was on specifically the fuel oil uses as at Tutuka, seen a saving of on average 100 million rand per month in fuel oil at Tutuka.
Philip, context please on the resignations. Thank you, Jan.
So in generation, we've got about 12,000 employees, in fact 11,909, and we have been losing about 37 employees per month. That's what we've been losing, and it varies. There are retirements, resignations, and also death in service. So when we speak about close to 40, it's exactly 37 out of a base of about 12,000 employees. Thanks.
Changed from previous years.
So we are seeing a steady increase in those numbers. I won't be able to quantify it, Sekonati, at the moment, but we are seeing a steady increase, and obviously the concern is the quality of the people that you lose.
Thank you, sir. Please give us the next set of questions.
We've got another one from Kyle Cowan at News 24. Questions for Mr. Dugashe. You mentioned that the plant is being run hard. What is the current average year-to-date energy utilization factor and generation load factor for the coal fleet? Can we please be provided with the year-to-date expenditure on privately owned OCGTs and the gigawatt hours produced? Antoinette Slabat at Report. Can you please explain how the OCGT spending remained on budget if the load factor is 8.9% versus the budget of the 1%? Deneen Erasmus at Business Day. What has been the financial implication cost of vandalism and theft for year to date?
Thank you, Soze. Can you assure us, please, that you're not only reading News 24's questions and excluding the rest?
Not at all, Siko. We're reading them as they come.
Thank you. Mr. Dugashe.
So if I can deal with the first part of the question. Our EUF, energy utilization factor, it's about 93.5% with a generation load factor of 53.2%. So that's where we stand. For the second one, I do not have the numbers with me. I'm sure we can get those in terms of expenditure on privately owned OCGTs. I don't have them with me at the moment, but I'm sure we can get those. The third question, explain how the usage OCGT spending remained on budget. So no, it did not remain on budget. The budget was 1%. However, every time we saw that we are going to be exceeding that, we would be asking for more funding going and begging the CFO for support. That obviously is putting strain on Eskom finances. And so those numbers are not included in the budget. They will be included in the forecast, though, in terms of where we are going.
Thank you, Philip. Sekhumoto, are you able to add anything to the OCGT question?
Yes, thank you, Sikonati. The load factor of the IPP OCGTs is around 9.76%, and the production has been 687 gigawatt hours, and the fuel cost, which is the variable cost, is just under 3 billion at 2.9 billion rand. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Caleb, are you able to add anything on the OCGTs and money? That's Caleb Kasim, the Chief Financial Officer, that is going to speak now, colleagues.
Thank you, Sekonati. Just to confirm, Sekhumoto's answer was on the independent OCGTs, Avon and Dedisa.
Just a second, please. Please step to the front so my colleagues can see you.
Thanks. Just to confirm.
And closer, stop hiding from this behind the screen. Thank you.
I think the cameras are tired of me. I've been there all of last week. But yeah, just to confirm, Sekhumoto's 3 billion rand relates to Avon and Dedisa, the IPP OCGTs. And with the EAF and the high usage of OCGTs during this year, Eskom's own OCGTs, we've incurred 5.5 billion year to date. And these numbers then, as we updated the assumptions for NERSA, we indicated that the use of OCGT load factors would then increase. I think those are one of the questions that have been asked. And like Philip said, at the low EAF, the EUF is quite high, above norms. Thanks.
Thank you. Before you go, you are not able to talk to the financial implication of vandalism yet.
No, we obviously would still have to investigate that and then get the numbers. So I don't have any numbers.
Thank you, Caleb. Sekhumoto?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think not everybody's on email, so I did get an update on the cost of vandalism. Year to date, we've had about 2,752 incidents, and the cost estimate is around 200 million. And that is on the losses we incurred, and I think what Jan spoke about was the cost of additional measures that we are taking to protect the assets. Thank you.
Please repeat the number,
2,752 incidents at the cost of 200 million rands.
Thank you so much. Please give us the next batch of questions, colleague.
We've got 6 questions from Paul Ash at the Sunday Times. Have you received Clyde Mallison's modeling documents, which in part questions to economic wisdom of trying to extend Kubrick's lifespan? His second question is, do you have any comments to make on the document? With extending Kubrick's lifespan expected to cost between 20 billion and 40 billion, why does Eskom not use that money to install 2 gigawatts of solar work, which in turn would provide much needed economic stimulus? In the long run, is Eskom planning to stand idly by as its market share is eroded by independent producers because it is unwilling or unable to do the work itself? Who are these 6 independent consultants who assessed Kubrick? Will their report be made public, and if not, why not?
Thank you, Sazi. Jan, we also should have Redivan Pakadin on the line to assist you with the questions there.
That's a vote of confidence. Thanks, Sikonati. Yes, we have received Mr. Mallison's modeling document, and we will consider it if there are any useful insights for future electricity planning. In terms of the question, can we make some comments? Yeah, the document definitely raises an interesting perspective. However, it includes a number of unsubstantiated assumptions around costing. Eskom and we were not consulted on any of the values used in this document. However, it does not change Eskom's perspective to proceed with the 20-year life extension because it's needed for baseload power. One carefully need to understand, and really, I believe there may be a lot of misunderstanding the difference between capacity and energy. The country needs capacity and cannot survive on energy alone because it depends on the demand of the customers. So I just like to make that comment again. I believe that Andre will, in terms of the 20 to 40 billion, Paul, it is actually 20 billion, so the business case has been approved for 20 billion. So let's be careful and not say between 20 and 40, because you know as well as I do, we will then be stuck at 40 billion. So the business case was approved at 20 billion. The chief will deal with item 4, so the 5 independent consultants. Now, these are all at the level, it's international experts, so actually involved in nuclear power plant throughout the world, at the level of chief nuclear officers, and people with experience of 20, 30 years, etc. So I am not at liberty to disclose the names. However, I can assure you, Paul, that it is really energy experts in the nuclear environment. In terms of will the report be made available, and if not, this report is a property of WANO, the World Association of Nuclear Operators. And they have made it very clear that these reports are not to be made available to anybody else outside Eskom. So unfortunately, that's where we are. However, what I am prepared to do, Paul, is to sit with you, Ridwan, the Chief Nuclear Officer, and myself, and we can discuss some of the conclusions and some of the recommendations in the report with yourself. Thanks.
All right, thanks. Let me just add a couple of perspectives. I think while Mr. Mallinson's report is intriguing, it contains a number of scenarios that I think are quite interesting. I think we've also got to look at where we are at the moment. Within a year, we can secure the future life of Kubrick, which, as we've said, because of the fact that it's been depreciated, for another 20 years, which means that we've got a highly reliable 24/7 capacity available at the most competitive cost in the fleet. From a business perspective, if you do the modeling, you look at the returns, this absolutely, as I've said before, is a no-brainer, and that is why we pursue it. In addition, bear in mind that the regulatory environment relating to the construction of new generation facilities is not within Eskom's control. So we can't sit as an entity and say, let's build 2 gigawatts of solar. There's a procurement process that is driven by the Independent Power Producer Office that reports into the DMRE, and that entity is responsible for procuring electricity in accordance with bid windows as determined by the policy department. So this is not something that we can do off our own bat. Secondly, your fourth question really is quite at odds with government policy, and of course Eskom is a state-owned enterprise. The decision has been taken to restructure and unbundle Eskom, as has been the trend internationally. With utilities, we are one of the few large remaining vertically integrated power utilities in the world. The majority have been restructured into generation, transmission, and distribution, exactly as we're at the moment doing. And the reason for that is that increasingly you want to see, A, more investment in generation, and B, you want to see more competition, which drives efficiency in the generation space. And the way to ensure that that happens is to have an independent transmission system and market operator, which is exactly what the new transmission company is going to be. You need to be able to give those investors confidence that their bids into the power pool will be fairly adjudicated when compared to Eskom generation. There will be no flow of sensitive information between Eskom transmission, or the national transmission company, South Africa, and Eskom generation. So this is not a strategic retreat from generation. We will, for a very long time, be a very large player in the generation space. But given the constraints that not only Eskom's balance sheet has, but also the country's balance sheet, I am completely convinced that this restructuring is in fact the right way to go forward in order to address generation capacity shortfalls in South Africa. So what we're doing is entirely consistent with the Department of Public Enterprises roadmap to a restructured electricity supply industry in South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Please give us the next batch of questions.
We have one from Terence Creamer at Engineering News. What is the status of Eskom's appeal on the Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries determination that the several coal stations with a combined capacity of 16,000 megawatts should be shut due to their non-adherence to minimum emission standards? By when do you expect an outcome? What is the status of the land release program in Mpumalanga? Are IPPs able to bid yet? And by when do you expect to make the first approvals? Then we've got one from Clyde Mallison, energy expert. Can it be please explain how the emissions, specifically SO2 emissions, have been meaningfully reduced without any retrofitting or flue gas desulfurization? And then we've got one from Antoinette Slabart again at Report. How critical is the approval of a 20.5% tariff increase for continuing Eskom's reliability maintenance?
Thank you, Swazi. Andre, are you able to deal with the first two questions, please?
Yep. So the status of Eskom's appeal is that our submission of the appeal has been accepted. There was a slight delay in submitting the appeal. That delay has been condoned, so the appeal is valid. It is under consideration by DFFE at the moment. And what now needs to happen is that the appeal authority needs to apply its mind to the appeal that we have submitted. We have made proposals to our shareholder department out of respect for the appeal process and to preserve the independence of the appeal authority. We are communicating on this with our shareholder department, DPE. We are trying to keep very clear lines of communication here so that we don't imperil our appeal through any perceived influencing of the appeal authority, and therefore it is now in the hands of the appeal authority. We do believe that we have made a compelling case, not only why such an appeal should be granted, but also why it is in the country's interest overall to deploy the 300+ billion rand required for compliance to accelerate the transition into cleaner and greener forms of energy, and in the process earn an economic return, create more jobs, and address in part the environmental and energy challenges that the country faces. When it comes to the status of the land release program in Mpumalanga, you may recall that the Minister of Public Enterprises, Mr. Praveen Gordhan, announced that Eskom would make available at some 36,000 hectares of Eskom-owned land on a lease basis to potential bidders who would be interested in connecting to the Eskom grid in Mpumalanga. We are delighted that the Minister has made this announcement. We think that this is an easy way to also make use of the 100 megawatt licensing dispensation announced by the President during the course of last year. And we're in the process of putting together a package that will allow us to invite bids under the leadership of Mr. Monde Bala, who heads up inter alia the grid access unit that reports into distribution. Monde, when do you think we can make the first approvals?
Yeah, Andre, with the current timelines, we were looking at around October, but we're looking at opportunities to expedite that. I think we've got a scheduled session on Friday to see how best we can push those timelines. But at this point in time, in terms of the timelines that are currently in existence, we're looking at around October. Thanks.
Thank you, Monde. Thanks, Andre. We have the next question on emissions. Am I correct? Deirdre, can you please help us with that? The question is, can it be explained how the emissions, specifically sulfur dioxide emissions, can have been meaningfully reduced without retrofitting of the flue gas desulfurization? Colleagues, the name is Deirdre Herbst. She is the General Manager for the Environment.
Good morning. Thank you, Sukunati. So the SO2 emissions from our proposals that we've submitted is that we will gradually reduce the SO2 emissions as we close down the older power stations. We've seen in the last 3 years already a reduction in SO2 as we shut down older plant and introduce Kusile power station, which is retrofitted, or not retrofitted, is built with flue gas desulfurization. And in terms of our plan, we are showing that we'll reduce SO2 by a further 22% by 2030. And then there's another tranche of power stations that close down in the early 2030s. And so we're looking at about at least 60% reduction in SO2. And that's mostly in the Mpumalanga airshed of about 50 to 60%. So that is how we are proposing that we'll reduce SO2. And of course, as we reduce the SO2, we'll get similar reductions in NOx, particulate matter, and carbon dioxide. Thank you.
Thanks, Deirdre. The next question is, how critical is NERSA's approval of the 20.5% tariff increase to continue Eskom's reliability maintenance? Caleb, please answer that question. How desperately do you want the 20.5% increase?
It's not just about the reliability maintenance. At the end of the day, we have to cover all our operational costs on an efficient base, taking into account the tight system, which does mean that if you want to ensure, and we plan to minimize or not plan to do load shedding, some more expensive options like the diesel will be utilized. So on that 62% EAF, it's some of those higher costs that have to come through that are being asked for in the tariff as more and more bid windows of IPPs come through, not only renewables, which are far cheaper than the previous rounds, but the risk mitigation comes into account, so that must be recovered. And then on Eskom, and when I look to balance the operational needs, the debt service needs, and what cash is available, Government has already given us the equity support. There's no more. So it's a tight balancing act from a cash flow perspective to ensure that we remain a going concern. So yes, Antoinette, the closer we get to Eskom's request, it will allow for financial viability. However, we have presented and acknowledged and are sympathetic to the affordability issue. There are some mechanisms within the tariff structures to deal with the low-end consumers, and there are mechanisms in terms of certain industrial customers in terms of the negotiated pricing frameworks to address. At the end of the day, as many stakeholders have indicated, putting inflation on the table, and I summarized last week by saying inflation will effectively allow for the growth in IPPs, including the volumes. By implication, it means all Eskom's costs are then deemed inefficient. And as government being the only shareholder, we would have no option but to approach government to ensure we can meet our cash flow needs and to prevent Eskom defaulting on its commitments. However, that will be a very difficult discussion. Ultimately, it is a tough choice, and you've got to decide what is the most efficient way to pay for this commodity, directly through as an electricity consumer or indirectly as a taxpayer. Thanks.
Caleb, thank you. What is the most efficient method? Monday, you have quite a problem in your hands in collecting municipal debt. Can you give us the outstanding amount, please? That's one class of customer, by the way, that is not very good in paying.
You're putting me on the spot. Yeah, the current amount that is owed by municipalities at this point in time.
Please get closer to your mic.
The number is 43 billion at this point in time.
Owed by municipalities who have not paid for the electricity.
And it's overdue debt.
Overdue debt. Thank you. Thanks, Monde. Colleagues, that's Monde Bala. He is the Group Executive for Distribution. Do we have any more questions, please, colleagues?
Yes, we do. We've got one from Nugukanya Mtambo at Jacaranda FM. She wants to know, Eskom has faced some criticism in recent weeks over the proposed electricity price increase. Is the backlash warranted, considering the tight spot consumers are currently in? Is Eskom in a position to revise those proposals so they are more sustainable for the consumer as well? Then another from Kyle Cowan at News 24. The new tender for fuel oil supply to coal stations, I believe for a 3-year period, and on what basis has Eskom procured fuel oil in the interim, i.e. short-term contracts? He also wants to know about the battery energy storage system tender.
Thank you, Sazi. Nugukanya, the questions you've asked are exactly the questions Caleb has just answered. There is a commodity that must be produced, and that's electricity, and there's a cost involved. It's either the taxpayer does paying or the consumer pays directly. Please, can you deal with the questions on fuel oil? Philip?
So the question is whether we've been buying fuel oil on the short term. Yes, we have. We are hoping to place long-term contracts soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Philip. The battery energy storage system tender. Andre?
Yeah, so this is a very important tender from a strategic perspective in order for us to expand our battery storage capability as Eskom, to strengthen the grid as well, particularly for renewable energy. We have received the bids, we have adjudicated the bids, and we are now in the process of finalizing the approval processes, which I expect to happen within the next month. And then we will have the first large-scale deployment of grid-tied batteries to assist us with managing peaks and troughs in the system. So this is quite exciting, and we were very impressed, may I say, with the quality of the bids that we received, and we look forward to switching those on. Thank you.
Thanks, Andre. Colleagues, let me remind you that we will again distribute this recording to all media. So if you didn't catch any of the responses accurately, you will get an opportunity to do so. Any more questions, please, colleagues?
Yes, we've got more from Kyle Cowan at News 24. Post-outage UCLF was 24.7% higher than the generation tolerance of 15%. This is a significant increase and, frankly, an indictment on the quality of work done during these outages. What is being done to address this in the short term, medium, and long term? What are the challenges in terms of ensuring quality work is being done? Has Eskom instituted any consequence management for Eskom officials who signed off on work done and the contractors who did this work? Are there financial repercussions for the contractors who deliver poor quality work, which is evident when a breakdown occurs immediately subsequent to an outage?
Thank you, Soze. Mr. Dugashe.
All right, thanks. So if I can maybe just give firstly a context. So post-outage UCLF overall, it accounts for a total of about 1.4%, contributes 1.4% to the total UCLF figure. So on its own, it's big, but in the bigger context, it's not. However, we do not expect such high post-outage UCLF when we've just worked on components. So the second question, what is being done the first question, what is being done to address this in the short term, medium term? So we have a number of approaches. One is we have a quality department that checks the quality of the work that is being done. We have supervision that is also supposed to be checking through inspection and test plans the quality of the work that is being done. We have engineering that also provides oversight over the quality of work that is being done. And we in terms of the work that is that we contract out, our bias, as we've said, is more for OEMs. So we expect competence when we're dealing with these contractors. So all of that is in place. So when something fails, yes, we do investigate, and yes, where applicable or when necessary, consequence management is taken. And not just for the contractors, but for our own people. So that has happened, and we do that on a routine basis when we have these failures. Investigate and look at where things went wrong. For contractors, yes, there are consequences as well, and we hold them to account. I would normally speak to the most senior person that I can with the contracting company. We apply penalties, and we have terminated a few contracts as a result of poor performance. So those are some of the things that we do. Thanks.
The next set of questions.
We have more from Kyle Cowan at News 24. He wants to know, can we please have an update on the investigations into the incident at Letabo in November last year, the pylon that was cut in an act of sabotage? Similarly, Mr. Director indicated during one of the briefings last year that there was to be an investigation into an incident at Matimba, the power cord that was dropped. Any progress there? The last question is from Clyde Mallison, the energy expert. Just like to clarify that the 20 to 40 billion rand cost of the Kubrick life extension was 20 billion for the actual works, and a conservative estimate of additional costs that will be incurred in 2022 due to the extra OCGT usage and extra load shedding due to the non-availability of 50% of the Kubrick output over the period. Thanks, Iko.
Sozi, thank you. The last one from Clyde is not a question. Am I correct? The budgeted cost of the Kubrick extension is 20 billion rand. That's the amount that will be spent during this year to ensure that Kubrick can deliver 1,800 megawatts over the next 20 years. Monde, do you have any update on the Letabo incidents, the lines that were outside the power station?
Yeah, that matter, Skonati, has been referred to the law enforcement. So now it's within their control. We have not had any sort of indication as to how far are they with the investigation, but we are making follow-ups with the law enforcement. Thank you.
That's with I think it's the infrastructure division of the Hawks. That's where the case was laid last year. Andre, do you have any more to say about the Matimba incident, Philip?
So this is an incident that occurred and it resulted in us losing generation capacity out of Matimba. So that case was investigated, and also additionally other performance issues at Matimba were also investigated. We are proceeding to take corrective action to make sure that we do address such issues and we do prevent them from occurring. So yes, that's where I would like to leave it at the moment.
And your colleagues can add to that, you can refer back to the security measures of which Jan and Andre spoke about earlier. Please give us the next set of questions. No further questions, ladies and gentlemen. Do you have any closing remarks, colleagues?
I think, Sekonate, I would just like to thank everybody attending this briefing for their interest and their participation. We have tried to step up our transparency and our availability to answer questions from the media. Hopefully we live up to that. Where we don't, you are welcome to get in touch with Sekonate and we can engage with you individually in order to ensure that questions that very much are in the public interest are fully responded to, and that we can also give South Africa the confidence that Eskom is trying its best under some very challenging circumstances. In closing, I'd like to thank our operations colleagues. Our colleagues really work extraordinary hours, all times of the day and night, weekends, under some very challenging circumstances. And I can assure you that our Eskom guardians, as we call them, are really committed, and I want to thank each and every one of them for the contribution that they make to this great organization. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for all your time. We will now go on to those previously arranged interviews with the Eskom colleagues. Let me remind you again that we will share the recording, and everyone that is looking for a sound bite will get it from there. Thank you.